Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 293. I welcome back my co-host, but also pretty highly requested guest co-host of the podcast. Every time we're putting these messages out, people are wanting Jordan back. So we had to get him back. Jordan Tyrer, how are we doing?
I'm all right. I don't know why. Honestly, I just waffle for a bit, but yeah, no. Apparently, it's going okay. So the people have, requested. They shall be met. Yeah.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave now and
Yeah.
you're going to take over.
God, no chance. Please don't.
No, for anyone that doesn't know, Jordan's been poorly recently. I mean, yeah,
Yeah. Apologies if I start coughing or sniffing or whatever. Just great time to hit in it. Off season, very busy time for us right now. And bronchitis just decides to kick in. So that was great. It's really good when you're trying to coach all day and you need your voice. And trying to run alongside athletes, and it's like you're dying from you. I sound like I've smoked 20 or 30 a day, so not ideal, but we're getting over it now. So apologies if I do cough.
and it doesn't quite work with a podcast, which is why he's been missing. He's been missing in action for a little bit.
Yeah,
We went
yeah.
less Barry White and more Jordan Tyrer for the time being. But mate, thank you for joining me again.
Yeah,
We've been meaning to do like a bit of a wrap up of the season as an episode, so that's what we're going to do today. Any updates to start with from your end? What's going on the South Coast?
Oh, what isn't going on? Really busy. The physical performance hub is, yeah, it's going from strength to strength. We're in a great place. Obviously, like I say, it's off season, so it's been quite a weird transition. Obviously, off season when you're in a club, that's the time to rest and recover. Off season when you're running a private facility and getting athletes through the door, that's one of the busiest times of the year. So yeah, really pleased. We just brought on a new coach as well. Sam Chapman, his name is, who ironically used to live with him when we were both at Southampton together, 2014, 2015 season. And he's just helped Salisbury win promotion to the Southern or National League South. So yeah, really, really good buzzing to have him on board because he's a great guy and a good coach. So another coach to add to the hub and help all the athletes down south. So yeah, really busy times, but really exciting times ahead. Sun's starting to shine a bit more. So on pitch sessions, I've got the factor 50 on. I've already got burnt a few times. The coach's tan is well and truly on the way. So yeah, busy times on the South Coast, but really exciting times.
Nice, mate. Very, very good. And you mentioned they're obviously taking on a new coach. Maybe we bring up the first topic being this time of year, and especially from what we've seen recently, being out at conferences and speaking to people, there's quite a few coaches out there looking for the next opportunity. So it was something that we were going to cover to start with, and without repeating probably a lot of the things that we've spoken about before, the value of your network and all that sort of stuff. Maybe just talking around what coaches can do to stand out in the industry, because it's a time when there's going to be manager changes. There already has been, which
Yeah.
staff changes, and that maybe leads to other roles becoming available as well. So, what's your thoughts in terms of? I know we're both out of that in terms of an employed aspect now, an employed position. But what's your thoughts initially on standing out, coaches standing out? And I know you've been through the interview process on both sides as well. We talked about it before, we did podcasts on it.
Yeah.
But anything that comes to mind on that?
Yeah, I think I mean straight away Dave Carolan's presentation at the Colchester event comes to mind. Because everyone knows Dave Carolan. We talk about him enough on this format, but he was speaking about the power of network, and I know we will always talk about that and how powerful it is. But he made a really good point that he was 3, 4, 5 years into his career at that moment and thought he cracked it. Kind of said he even said he'd stopped going to networking events and stuff like that and reaching out to people, just having a chat, having a naff, having a coffee. And so his network not plateaued a little bit, or it hadn't quite, it wasn't quite as active as it used to be. And then when he lost the role I think he was currently in at the time, he had to turn back and rely on it and realized it wasn't actually as strong as he thought it was, and then had to kind of rebuild it and things like that. So I think Hey, listen, I'm fully aware that, you know, my first full-time role in football was 2014. So anyone who's been in football longer, this probably isn't the. I'm not speaking to the veterans here because I'm sure they've got way more than me. Maybe someone who's, you know, couple of seasons in, 3-4 seasons into their career, or just starting out, whatever. Like, I think David Carroll's point is quite poignant, that it is worth keeping, you know, an active network going, because you never know. You just never know when you might rely on it. And that can be, like we've said previously, that can be just reaching out to people, having a chat, having a natter, you know, even on social media, seeing a post on LinkedIn or Twitter or X, sorry, and you know, just retweeting it, replying, say, love this, really good, hope you're well. You know, little things like that just keep your name, if you like, your brand in and around it. So when inevitably, as we said, summer changes happen, you can kind of, you know, potentially rely on a few people that you keep kept up with and keep speaking with and all that sort of stuff. And that might help you just, you never know, land a role. But yeah, we'll always bang on about the power of networking, because we know firsthand, we've seen some of our members, you know, Football Fitness Federation members who have, you know, landed roles literally through networking events, being on the podcast, being guests, stuff like that. So yeah, never underestimate it. You can sometimes, like Dave said, you can sometimes think you've cracked it, and something happens in football, and you know, off you go. I was first hand of that when COVID came along. You think you've cracked it, and you get made redundant because of the pandemic. It's you never predict these things, but sometimes you then have to rely on other people and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely keeping in touch with people is good. And at the end of the day, it keeps your hand in, you know, new things. You kind of keeping yourself developing as well by learning what other people might be putting out there and sharing. And we spoke about that on the previous ones in terms of social media and stuff, and the power of that. It can help your brand increase, but also it helps you learn. So yeah, I just think not closing your mind off and going, oh, I've cracked it now, I don't need to speak to people anymore, or I don't need to network, or I don't need to go to that conference. And that ability to continually try and reflect and grow and improve, and not just think I'm the finished article, which I like to think a lot of us don't think we are, but sometimes it can happen. You can be guilty of it.
It shocked me recently, to be honest, about going out to conferences and speaking to coaches, and there's some coaches that are not only very good at what they do, but also have a lot of experience doing what they've done for a number of different years across a number of different clubs, different positions, but are out of work. And that made me sort of stand back recently and think, wow, like, I don't think there's been a time there's been as many examples like this recently. And I think the point, just to add a layer onto what you're discussing there, and it's something I was trying to think who said this, where they talked about the levels of networking. And apologies, whoever it was, if you're listening, but I think there's something in that where when you're in a position, especially in the thick of things in the season, and like Dave said, you sort of think that you've cracked it, or maybe you're just in the flow of the season. You just don't feel like you've got the opportunity to go to events, or maybe even have that phone call or whatever it is. There's different levels to it. And you've mentioned it there. It might just be a message to people just to see how things going. The other level would maybe be a phone call, which is time consuming. It might be a meetup, which we talked about before, getting a coffee with someone. But again, that's booking it into the diary, making sure you're both available. It's then time consuming in terms of how long you're going to sit with them. Then you've got the events, which, yes, we're going to talk about those because we run them. But again, you've got to give up an evening or give up an afternoon or whatever it's going to be to come and attend and meet people. So there's different levels and there's different ways of approaching it. I think the main thing is be doing something. Like, don't stop, be doing something, because if there is a time where you end up in a position where you've not got the role and you need that next opportunity, that's when you're going to turn to it. And that's exactly what you've said, exactly what Dave said. And I know that there's still people now that have got good networks that are still struggling getting that next position. So I think it's always just thinking ahead. It's always thinking within this industry. There's so many bodies trying to fill only so many roles. how do you stand out, and how would you maybe preempt the next move? It doesn't mean that you have to move, but are you ready to step into that next position? And I think if the answer is no, then what can you do right now to help that position?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's hard, isn't it? Because you've almost got to stay looking over your shoulder at all times, which isn't an easy thing when you're in the thick of it, you know, certainly around like the busy, congested periods of the season. You're thinking about how you're just keeping, 11 plus players fit, and you're not thinking, oh, actually, am I still networking properly? Or am I catching up with such and such? Oh, I said I'd go for a coffee with him, I haven't been in a couple of months, sort of thing. It is really difficult, but I think you hit the nail on the head where it's worth reminding people. Certainly, again, if you're a younger practitioner, a couple of seasons in, or certainly trying to get your first big role or whatever it might be, that this is a very like high demand industry with very few roles, but certainly full time roles. And I always remember when I used to do guest lectures and stuff with some of the unis we were linked with at certain clubs. I used to just do a slide where it was like there's 92 football league clubs, and when you break that down into how many full-time roles actually across those 92 at any given point there might be, it's really, really few and far between. And of those 92, there's not many clubs which will have that many full-time roles, certainly in sports science and S&C. And we're looking at, lower League Two, League One clubs, and I know firsthand that when budgets are really tight, they might not be very well paid, or they might not even be, paid roles at all. Then you go down to National League North and South. Again, you're looking at even fewer roles. So when you actually do the maths, at any given time, there might be like 5, 10 tops roles going at one moment. Yes. So when you actually then work out the numbers on how many practitioners there are, there's a really, really small, window of opportunity to actually land those roles. So it's worth sometimes keeping that in mind, because if you are a newer practitioner, the phrase I always used to like was sometimes you've got to roll the punches a little bit, because you might think you've cracked it. And certainly I'm guilty of this. I remember when I'd been a couple of seasons in, I'd graduated, I'd worked full time at a Premier League Cat 1 academy for a placement year. By the time I graduated, I'd already had a part-time job at a Cat 2 academy in the Championship. Gone to do my masters in 2 more clubs. I was leading an academy 3 nights a week for the physical performance side of things in the women's game. I was thinking, this is now when I really need my proper good full-time role, I can step into that. But I remember that summer, I think I was trying to add it up the other day, 5, 6 interviews, maybe 7 interviews, and I landed 1.
Yeah.
And I think it was one of the last ones I actually interviewed for, and it was the Notts County role at the time. But I remember in 2 or 3 weeks, the space of 2 or 3 weeks, I was everywhere in the country just trying to interview. And it's quite easy to get demoralised when the feedback comes back or it doesn't come back at all. Yeah, you were good, but we just had someone better. Oh yeah, we thought you were excellent, but unfortunately on the day we had a candidate who's a little bit more experienced than you. But yeah, credit to yourself, you did really well. Or it could be the other way around. Oh yeah, you weren't quite right. This is why. Or like I say, you don't get any feedback at all, and you sat there scratching your head thinking, I thought this was going to be a bit easy. Actually, this is actually quite hard to land a role, and it is keeping your head up sometimes and rolling with the punches. Like I say, certainly for those younger practitioners when you're trying to land those roles. But yeah, when you're a more experienced practitioner, sometimes it does come down to look how many roles are actually available. And we can't forget as well that a lot of managers now, certainly foreign managers, will bring their staff with them. So it's not just English practitioners anymore. It's not just the practitioners from this country. There might be practitioners coming from abroad, coming with managers as well, first managers. So it is tough. It is tough. We've anyone who's worked in the industry for a long time, or certainly a few seasons, will know that you have got to look over your shoulder a little bit. But that again, go back to what we started, it comes down to making sure you are staying in touch with people sometimes, and just keeping your face known a little bit. And when you're at a conference, you introduce yourself to people, and not just sitting in the corner and going, yeah, got what I needed to do, I've come here for my credits, and I can tick that box and off I go back to my club and not going to say hello to anyone. So yeah, ultimately it's hard, isn't it? It's tough. It's not an easy thing to do.
I think the other thing, speaking to people recently, is that I'd question that if you without this sounding really negative, which it probably does, if you lost your position right now, if you had to leave your role right now, what would you do if there was a time, say you were getting landing a position in 6 months, and yes, you might agree a package with the club or whatever it is, but what's going to tide you over for the time being as well? Because you see that with coaches as well, don't you? They don't know that they're going into a position, but something might come up within a few months' time. But between now and then, what would you turn to? And I think it's having a bit of a backup plan. I think with the nature of the industry, with it being, especially first team, with it being results driven, it would only make sense for you to have a bit of a backup plan on what you would turn to do. I know some people say you just go with your plan A and you put everything into your plan A, but some of these decisions are completely out of your hands. You might do a really good job. God, some people do a good job and get good results and still end up out of a job. So like it is out of your hands. So it would only make sense that you've got your plan B and C and D of things that you're going to turn to. And then like Jordan said, what are you then doing to stand up and stand out? And I think that's some of the important things. And we've not necessarily got all the answers to it, but I think it's an important question for everyone to ask themselves. Like what are you doing now? And what would be the backup that you turn to?
Yeah, I think, and just adding on to that, I think it would be wise just from, like you say, if you're looking at a plan B, not even if you need to action it, but you're just trying to put a plan B together just so you have it, almost knowing what other opportunities there are and being brave to seek those out. So things like, we know staff as well who work for the PGMOL, just supporting referees and assistants and things like that in terms of their physical performance. NHS routes, in terms of rehab from NHS routes and things like that. The women's game, by the way, like there's definitely opportunities there, even if it is a part-time role or whatever. It might just tide you over, but yeah, sometimes, like, we know football is so full on, and when you're a little bit blinkered and you're just head down, get through the season, and then we'll get to off season, and then we'll have a little break and recharge, and then we'll go again for pre-season. And it can be hard to get your head up and look around and go, actually, what other opportunities are there for maybe a plan B or a plan C? But actually knowing, okay, now I'm actually in a position where maybe I'll go private, maybe I can set up some individual stuff, maybe I can do some online support, maybe I could go into education and academia, maybe I could go and potentially, work in colleges, with higher education settings and things like that. So there are loads of opportunities out there when you actually have a look. But like you say, you might need to just have a plan B just in case. And I think that is definitely a wise piece of advice, because, I hopefully, touch wood, another pandemic isn't going to come across. But we had a pandemic, and all of a sudden a lot of coaches lost their roles, including myself, and it was like, what do we do now? So having those plans in place can be useful.
Yeah, I remember the exact phone call that we had when it happened. I remember where I was, and we it was like a crisis talk, wasn't it? We just coming up with bit boring ideas on what the next move was. And I think that's the lesson to take, isn't it? That okay, we don't know that there's a pandemic around the corner or anything like that. But if you and others would have had a bit of an idea of what you can turn to at that time, which is hard, because when you're putting all your attention on, like you said before, your players and your programming and your daily tasks and everything that you're doing, for you then to do something that essentially you don't need right now probably seems quite pointless. But I'd urge people, I'd say, get your phone out, get notes out, and make some notes on exactly what the plan would be, and then maybe put it away and leave it. And then they say you can add to it when you want to add to it, but at least you've got some ideas then of something that can fill that time.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'll just bring this up because this has been a bit of feedback I've heard recently, which I never really understand. And I think, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if you've had this feedback actually from an interview as well, is people saying that they're overqualified for the role. So they're going for a role, and whoever's conducting the interview or hiring, their feedback is that that person is overqualified. What's the sort of views and what's your experiences with that?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I have had that before, and it was like you're frustrated ultimately because you go in, um, but you're basically admitting that I'm qualified for this role and I would bring good experience, but you're wanting somebody there. And I think it's one of those situations where certainly if it's a club, and let's say I know we were obviously discussing this off air who it was, but let's say you've been at a club for many years, leading departments, and then you're applying for say let's say that's no disrespect, like a youth development role, or a youth phase sports scientist, youth development phase sports scientist sort of thing. But you've been leading departments for a long time, and you'd be becoming a member of a department. People might look at that and go, well, it might upset the balance a little bit, or they might think, certainly because we know a lot of roles don't put salaries on them quite a lot, and credit to the clubs that do advertise the salaries, in my opinion, because it sets the boundary out straight away and people know where they stand. So, but a lot of clubs still don't do it. I kind of get why. But they might be thinking, oh, if they've been leading the department for a long time, they're going to come in and they're going to be demanding way too big a salary. And then sometimes, you're just overqualified. It's just an easy kind of get out of jail card to say, we think you're going to cost us too much. That could be a reason, and I may be being a little bit facetious there, but I think that is probably the approach some clubs might take. But yeah, it's a frustrating one, isn't it? Because in a lovely rose-tinted world, you would probably think if somebody came to you with 20 years of experience in sports science and S&C, and they wanted to work in an academy role as a youth developer, like wow, right? You'd be, obviously if they have relevant youth experience and stuff like that, you'd be like, wow, what an opportunity to help all the other department, the other role, like the people they might line manage, all that sort of stuff. So it does seem a little bit backwards sometimes. Again, I think money might be a little driver behind that and other reasons, but it is a strange one. It is a strange one, and I do feel for people when they hear that feedback, because it's like, certainly if you've lost a role and you're looking to just find a role, and also one thing that I was going to say earlier, that sometimes you take a transition, and if you are leading departments, or you're in a first team role, and it is a lot of traveling, a lot of time demands away from family, away from friends and loved ones and things like that. Sometimes in your life, depending on where you are, you might want a more settled role. Say, like in an academy that might say a Cattle Academy. Let's take Cattle Academy, for example, and it is a youth development sports scientist, maybe looking after the youth development phase, under 13s, under 16s. And typically you're not going to travel all over. You're not going to have any overnight stays. The fixtures might be a little bit more, local potentially, and it might allow you and your family to spend more time together. So you'd almost say, actually, there's nothing wrong with somebody with lots of experience wanting to go into that role, to then be met with, are you too overqualified? You should be going for a lead role. It's a bit like, well, hang on a minute, there's reasons why I'm applying for this. It's not just a whim, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's multiple reasons in there, and I think there's loads of things you can pick, but yeah, it's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah, no, when I hear it, I think it must refer to finances straight away. But it does make sense what you're saying about maybe upsetting the apple cart a little bit, where if someone's coming in, because it's quite a big change, isn't it, to be the lead of a program to then fall under someone else's management. But yeah, no, it's an interesting one. It's just one I've heard recently. The other thing we're going to talk about in this episode was a little reflection on podcast episodes from this season as well. So I put it to you on text before, just to say, have a think about maybe an episode that stood out for you, maybe a guest that stood out for you, and the reasons why. So I had a little think, I had a little look through as well, and I think I've got my top one. But have you got yours?
Yeah, can I be greedy enough too, though?
You can have two. I'll let you have two.
Nice. So I think the one that really stood out was Sean Cummins' one. I'm biased. I've spent a lot of time in academy football and certainly working with youth players. So
Great co-host on that one as well. Really good co-host.
yeah, there you go. That's why it was so good. Now I'm joking. But I think I've known Sean's work for a long time. I've known people. I've met Sean before, and we know people who've worked as part of PhD students under Sean, and the research that was done at Bournemouth was with Sean on biobanding and things like this. So I'm a little bit biased. I'm a big firm believer in biobanding. And even Sean admitted on the episode, biobanding doesn't solve every problem in an academy when it comes to selection, when it comes to retained release, when it comes to development, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't solve all the problems, we know that, but it helps and it gives information. So I think for me, the reason I really like that episode is it gave a brilliant overview on the directions of biobanding. Just the directions of like actually just being aware of differences in growth and development of youth players. So yeah, if you haven't listened to that episode yet and you work with youth players and you've got some idea of biobanding or whatever, I highly recommend listening to it, because it is just going to give you more information. And even if you're not working with youth players and you're interested in it, 100% give it a listen, because it is, I think, going to be the future of academy football. Certainly, as we're seeing more, obviously we follow Sean and he's flying off all over around the world, and more countries are taking it up. The FAs of different countries are taking it up and becoming part and parcel of that, team selections and things like that. So I think it's going to become more prevalent. So it's only wise to kind of arm yourself with a lot of information on it. And even if you disagree with it, it's good to just have that information. So I think that was a really, really good episode. Sean spoke really well, and of the flaws of a lot of the research behind biobanding and where it still needs to go. So you never know, people you might listen to, they could help contribute towards that research and help push the the industry forward in terms of that area. So that was really, I really enjoyed that one. Like I said, I'm a fan of biobanding, and I do appreciate it has got steps to address, but I thought that was a really good one. So that was from an academy club wise. That was probably one of my favorite episodes.
258, by the way, anyone wondering. Okay. So 258.
There you go. Straight away, scroll down on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen, SoundCloud, etc. So the other one for me would be Tom King's, from a private facility point of view. Obviously, of both of us being in that world now. He gave a brilliant overview again of how a well-run private facility working with athletes one-to-one or small group can run and can work, and also I think gives good background. So if you're either running a private facility or as part of a private facility and you've only ever worked at clubs, sometimes there's that little bit of why is my athlete going to them sort of thing. I'm putting on a brilliant program. They should be just doing everything I'm saying as a squad of multiple players. And certainly if you're looking after dozens, if not hundreds of players in academies, you start to realize when you're on the other side of it in those private facilities, why players and ultimately players' parents, if they're youth players, sometimes want one-to-one work. Sometimes they might feel like they're not quite getting enough at clubs, which is fair enough. Or sometimes first team players, they just want that personal touch and that one-to-one touch. So I think Tom gave a really good, and it sounds like he's running a brilliant program there. So again, would highly recommend that. If you're at a club and you want to get more context on what private facilities sort of thing are doing, the good ones and the ones that are running really well, I think that's a really good episode to listen to. But also, if you are thinking about going into private world and working one-to-one with athletes or small group, it gives a good overview on how you can best test, review, and just work and develop with players privately. So yeah, there's my two. I was greedy. Sorry, they were my two favorite from the season.
No, that's good. I'm just going to look what episodes Tom's was 281, for anyone wondering. So no, two really top episodes and two different topics as well. But I know two topics that you have a great interest in, and probably has transitioned quite nicely in your career, hasn't it? I know you still focus on the growth and maturation, but that was very much part of your previous roles, and now with the facility and everything that Tom spoke about. It was really hard to pick out like one, because there's so many good ones and so many aspects of each episode that was really good. But I've gone with 272, Joe Clubb. So Joe is a sports science consultant, and what we did in that episode is she released an article on the top 10 challenges faced by sports scientists. I picked out 3 of them that I wanted to discuss with her. So we spoke about the technology tsunami. We talked about applying female athlete research, and also accel, decel, and change direction. So I thought it was 3 topics that super current, and some, I know Joe's got great experience in them as well. So on the technology side, around data, the amount of data that's available, the technology that's available, how do we go about selecting what we use, what's effective, what's not. Ben Rosen, it was actually a few episodes before Joe, he spoke about it on the episode. He's now moved, but he was at Blackburn at the time, and he basically said about, if we don't use it, get rid of it. Yeah. We're going to be as ruthless as that. Like, we want it to inform the program, and I think that was the same sort of decision from Joe. She used the phrase the value burden matrix, which was essentially how impactful is it at that time and how much of a burden is it, and however that fits on that spectrum is how you decide whether you use it, whether you lean into it or not, which I think is super useful for clubs and coaches as well. The female athlete research, or applying female athlete research. So I thought that was a really interesting topic as well, something that's come up in episodes where coaches are obviously working within the female game. Jack Clover spoke on it recently. And just around, like, there needs to be more research done in the female game, because the progression that we've talked about a lot is probably, looking at it from my understanding, it's probably lacking the amount of research that it needs within the women's game, especially on certain topics. Joe spoke about certain people just doing some great work in the female game. I know that there is, but in terms of research as a whole, it's probably falling behind a little bit. So she talked about, like, future areas of research as well. We've talked about menstrual cycle, the future of the game, and where that's going to lead to. And then sort of tying it in with that is the accel, decel, change direction. And to just, I'm cheating here because I'm pulling other episodes in, but there's episodes that spring up to mind when we talk about some of this stuff around acceleration, deceleration, change direction. The likes of Jonas, who I'm not sure whether that episode was this season or not. I think it might have been. Jonas, Halu, Theodros, who's now with the FA. They did brilliant episodes breaking all that down. But then also the episode with Gareth Sanford and Damien Harper. Damien spoke about deceleration. He's got loads of research out on it. So I think they were just 3 really good topics, and Joe did a great job of summarizing it. And then obviously that's only 3 of the 10 that she actually discusses in the article. So you can go and read the article. I think it's on her website. So yeah, that was probably the main one, even though I've cheated there and brought up about 6. That's probably the main one that stuck out for me.
Yeah, I think like, just tying onto that, we've spoken off air, and I know people who work in the women's game who speak about it quite regularly. I think it's Simon Brundish here. We talk about, like, the research into women's game and the explosion of the women's game. I was literally having this conversation last night when I was working with one of my clients, a female client, and we were at a local facility, local field, doing some sprint testing. Look over at the other side of the pitch, and there's a women's team training at youth, like, I think like under 10s, under 11s, or something like that. And we were having a conversation about how literally 5 years ago, that probably wouldn't have existed. You know, maybe it's only go back 10 years, definitely the amount of women's teams we're seeing, even at grassroots levels and up, wouldn't have existed. Now there's still so much to go in terms of the women's game, and, you know, teams going professional, but you're seeing more and more teams go full-time and professional. I think the New Saints have gone at least semi-pro recently. You know, Wales. I think Portsmouth, I heard, have gone full-time now and professional as well. Portsmouth, maybe that they got promoted. So it's increasing in terms of the investment in the game. The clubs are investing in there, but what we're still trying to almost find, certainly as practitioners, is the, like I say, the research side of it, and applying that research to our players. Because, you know, if you applying growth and maturation research, let's say, it's been there for a long time, but most of those studies are in, you know, boys football, in academy boys football, not girls football. So then straight away there's differences. And again, in academies or RTCs, but women's football, quite a lot of them were or sometimes are dual age bands, you know, under 10s, under 12s, under 14s, under 16s, and the even numbers only sort of thing. So you've got two age groups in one. And again, big knock-on effects of that, talent ID, development, growth and maturation. So there needs to be more in terms of the investment, but then, like you say, the research, like Joe was saying. And I think the main point on that is just the historical training loads, like you say, talking about decels, accels, just total volume of training. You know, in terms of a training age, you can, you know, boys' academies are very well established, most of them. You know, that they're, you could like we've been working with over this off season with some players who've been at Bournemouth since they were an under 7 and under 8. You know, and they're now an under 21s player, under 23s player. So they have literally over a decade's worth of training age in an academy system. Whereas a lot of girls, and certainly the female athlete I was working with last night, joined an academy setup at under 18s, under 17s level. So training age wise, you know, very, very, very young, but we're expecting them to train, and we're trying to almost match the female model to the male model and apply the research from the male model to the female model, but the training age and the history might not be there for the female players yet, because that grassroots level, you know, the young youth academy level isn't quite there yet. So that's where I think a lot of research needs to go into, because it's brilliant that we're seeing the investment in the women's game. It's brilliant that we're going, right, teams are trying to go, you know, professional, teams are trying to set up, you know, full women's academies. But then we've got to be careful a little bit and try and walk before we run and go, right, let's do, you know, big long seasons and training every day and, you know, matches every weekend till the end of the season, you know, till May, June time, if they haven't got that training age as a youngster and they've just been playing once or twice a week, you know, for the last 10 years, then all of a sudden it's right, you're in a full-time model and they haven't got that training age as a youth athlete. So that's where I think that research definitely will go. And I know Cyber talks very highly on this, and I know a lot of other, you know, top practitioners in the female game talk on this very, very well, much better than I do, probably much better explained than I just did as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good one to pick out, to be fair, because it goes, like you said, I know you need 6 episodes, but it covers a lot in terms of where research can be better in the future and going forward, hopefully.
Just a little shout out as well, just to cover a few more episodes. Jay Bradley, which is only a couple of episodes ago, 291. She spoke about that. She spoke about her experience. So Jade is a player and a coach. So it's a really nice perspective from someone that's been through youth football, now playing at a good level, but coaching at a good level as well. So Jay gave a really nice perspective on previously, historically what it was like as a young female player, but also looking forward, changes that potentially need to be made for the female game to progress even further as well. So yeah, definitely, if that's an area of interest for you, I'd definitely go and check that episode out. That's quite a nice wrap up for the season. We're obviously currently off season. Without wearing your Liverpool hat, Jordan, which we all know is sat under there somewhere.
I mean, off camera is literally Stevie Gerrard shirts and things like that, literally just here. So yeah, no, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah,
we'll ignore them. We'll just look at the Michael Jordan one behind you.
Yeah,
yeah. With that in mind, looking forward to the new season. We didn't speak about this, so it'll be interesting to get your thoughts.
There we go.
Let's lean on the side of sports. Let's take the fan out of it. Lean on the side of sports science, support, physical development. What's your thoughts going into the 24-25 season? Jeez.
What, in terms of Liverpool specifically, or just how the world's going to look?
No, forget about Liverpool. Just because we spoke about it again before we started recording this season. Fixture congestion was one thing that came up. Rule changes was something that we spoke about at the start of the season. I've not seen anything going into the new season yet on that, like any changes that we can talk about just yet, but I imagine there probably will be. We've obviously got Euros that we're going into. So where'd your thoughts go looking forward to 24-25?
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief. I think we're now seeing much more people come out and say fixture congestion is becoming a problem. And like it used to be like a couple, but now it's like people are agreeing. Like Klopp is back. I'm going to mention him. Klopp's been banging on about it for years in terms of too many games in too short a time. Even Pep's agreeing with him. You know, if Pep and Klopp, I know they look like they get on. I'm sure they don't. You never know. Pep's agreed with him. Top managers who have won everything are saying too much. I'm sure. I think it was Bale. I can't remember. The other day came out and said something's going to happen in terms of it's going to take something to go wrong before institutions go. Actually, maybe we're putting a bit too much on the players. Like Newcastle and Tottenham is a great example. They finish a long Premier League season and then they fly out to Australia and do a tournament. And now we're looking at FIFA World Cup being in America, and then you throw in the Euros, and then it's like when are players switching off? And certainly when you actually add in the off-season demand, if you like, because it is now becoming the popular thing in terms of you finish your season and then it's off-season, you're going to work really, really hard in the off-season before you go into pre-season and work really, really hard, which opens up a whole new kind of worms. Certainly as a private facility owner and things like that, you got players messaging you, I want to work really hard, I need to do loads of sessions, and it's like, well, actually, have you rested yet?
Yeah.
Like, have you actually had a break yet? And that is genuinely, you're kind of in a rock and a hard place sort of thing. But there's going to have to be a tipping point, or when either clubs put their foot down and go, we're not flying off to XYZ, or we're not doing. And again, I have spoken about the 12:30 kickoff time for Liverpool again, but genuinely TV money dictates when certain clubs have kickoff times, and if that is then genuinely biasing certain teams maybe the wrong way, that they have less recovery time from long hard seasons or long weeks within that season, multiple fixtures in a week sort of thing, and then they have to do a 12:30 kickoff time because the Premier League agreed a deal with certain countries that they can have a kickoff time there. We're now seeing player welfare is actually quite low down the list, and as we might have already worked out, money is the number one priority. So when, I don't know. Who goes, right, we've had enough of this, we're not going to fly off to this country to do a random tournament that you've just made up. The national teams say actually, doing Nations League and other these competitions, that is it worth it? Or do they start, betting in players who haven't played? It'd be very brave national team manager to go, right, we're going to take all our best English players who have just played 30, 40, 45 games in a season, and I'm not going to play them at the Euros because they need a rest. That's probably not going to happen because that national team setup, they want to win the tournament. But player welfare is now starting to be questioned more than ever. I've ever seen it, certainly. And people are, I know the media it's access all areas nowadays, but people are questioning it, going, why are we flying off there? Why are we doing another tournament? Why are we this sort of thing now? And where's the tipping point? That's the question. I think we're all aware that it's probably going to be at some point coming up. Like I said, I think it was Gareth Bale, I need to double check that, saying that it's going to take something bad to happen before change happens. Hopefully it doesn't get there, but I kind of agree with him, to be honest. So I think that's going to be the next season. Certainly, we're probably going to see more tournaments, more fixtures, more congestion, trying to squeeze more fixtures in a short space of time, plus players going off to the Euros, then coming back to the clubs. Are they going to get a rest? I don't know. So that seems to be more of what we're talking about than ever before in terms of congestion. And we've spoken on it in previous episodes in terms of how do you deal with that. But if you want to listen to that, yeah, obviously go back previous episodes. But I think that's my prediction. More questions over how much can these players take before they break, which is a bit of a worrying trend to be heading into. So fingers crossed there's some solutions come up, but I think it's just only going to keep getting worse until something bad happens, personally. But hopefully not. Hopefully I'm proved wrong.
No, that's a really interesting point, because I was only talking today with someone about the change of the Champions League setup as well, which I still actually haven't looked into properly. I don't really understand how it works. I just know that there's potentially more games to be played as well. And like you said, combined with the fact of these random trips that clubs do, and it's not just the games, it's the travel and everything that goes into it. It just seems crazy, but we know why they do it, because they're making money off it. It's all to do with sponsorship, isn't it, and support around the world. We completely understand why, but I was trying to think when you were talking, we like player robustness. It's obviously something that monitored with player load, and I know clubs will rotate depending on players' minutes, and probably something that fans don't see a lot of the time. That, oh, why so and so being left out? Or he's being left. There is actually a reason behind it. I get that, but at the same time, I was trying to think of players where they're like the most robust players. Who are some of the players that you see on the team sheet every single week? And I think now when you look across the league, probably a few years ago when there was less games, you could probably name people where they're like, yeah, they're going to be there pretty much all season. And now you think of like, I was trying to think of City, like Haaland, De Bruyne, both had injuries this year. I know there's Man United have talked about it a lot, like the amount of injuries they've had. Liverpool have had loads, but just individual players as well. Arsenal maybe have had a little bit of consistency with their in terms of a starting lineup, not rotated things maybe as much as others. I could be wrong, but like actually looking at it, and that's just my opinion of what I've seen, but I could be wrong on that. But what's your thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah,
increasing player robustness, but there is a point where it does come down to like they can only take so much at the same time, can't they?
yeah, and I think you're right because sports science has got more of an involvement in football than ever before. That's true. So you might go back 10 years and you say, well, actually, the sports science, or maybe even longer than that, let's go 20, 30 years, right? Sports science probably weren't a thing. So there wasn't anyone going, he's played X amount of minutes, his acute chronic lows are all over the place. He might need a rest. They'd just play him until they broke. But then they were probably playing less fixtures with less travel. And I think we're in a bit of an unknown period because, like, even with things like you say, the Champions League, but then also you consider the Europa League and also you consider the UEFA Conference League, some of the locations that those clubs are going are all over the place. Like in terms of time travel and all this time to travel and all that sort of recovery, etc. It's hard to then sort of predict robustness and are they ready to play? Are they not? And like the elephant in the room is that even with all this sports science involvement and S&C involvement, injury rates are still increasing.
Yeah,
as far as I'm aware. Last time I looked, so something's clearly not right. The S&C, there's more S&C coaches, more sports science involvement, like I say, than ever before, but injury rates are increasing. What is also increasing, less time between games, more travel, yada yada yada. So yeah, it's in terms of those consistent players, like you say, who you go back. I think I'm going to think of the heyday, in my opinion, heyday of Premier League, 2000 to 2010, when you had a proper, genuine, Wenger, Fergie, going to count in Benitez and Mourinho all going for it. I could name you those starting teams and the players who played most of, like Gerrard, week in, week out, after Carragher, Hippier. I'm just going to name you the Liverpool squads, but like they were because the fixtures almost allowed them a little bit. Whereas now, again, compared to this season, and some of those clubs I just said have a massive injury risk. Liverpool have barely played the same team, 2 games in a row. I look at the Carabao Cup final. Most of the 23s were on the pitch and they still won the trophy. I'm just saying, but like it is. There's definitely been a big shift. So injury rates still increasing, but there's more sports science and S&C involvement than ever before. So there's something clearly not quite right there. And I think I put that down to, reduced rest between games, increased travel, all this, that, and the other. So, more big questions that we can answer. I'd say we're not going to answer and come down to the bottom of it right now, but hopefully increase the volume and the noise around this topic.
Yeah, we'll definitely do more on this as we get into the season. Obviously, once England have won the Euros, we'll talk about it a little bit more. Jordan, that was a nice wrap up of the season, and there's definitely some podcasts for people. If you haven't checked out those episodes that we've mentioned, go and check those out because they're definitely worth a listen. We've got some exciting ones coming up as well over the next few weeks, some that hopefully Jordan will be joining me on as well. Yep. So keep an eye out for those. But thank you for coming back on, mate. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see that up and fit and well now, back to 100% fighting fit.
Yeah, 100%. But no, thank you to, and again, thank you to listeners, everyone who's come along to network events this year. There's been some brilliant networking events, with new numbers and presentations and things like that. And again, if people want to go back to watch a lot of these presentations that we keep referring to in these episodes, you need to check the community out because they're all on there. And also the WhatsApp group as well, the members WhatsApp group. Thank you to everyone in there who contributed, members Monday questions and all that sort of stuff. Just keeping the community growing, and by the community I mean also the wider sports science community as well as Football Fitness Federation community. So thank you to all you guys who contributed as well. It's really, really helped.
Yeah, definitely echo that. No, thank you, mate.
Perfect. Well, speak soon.